In this video, we're going to talk about editing wire stories on the news desk. This is true for both sports team members and for nation world business team members. And when you're selecting and preparing wire stories, you're always going to start by going to the Wires workspace. You'll know the Wires workspace because the icon is a little globe. Mine is a little bit obscured right now by an exclamation point. Let's see if I can clear that off. That's the globe. When you go to the Wires workspace, there are a bunch of shortcuts that you can have downloaded. If you would like to peruse the ones that we already have created and our team shortcuts, that's a good place to start. You can also customize and save your own shortcuts, which we could go over later if that is of interest to you. So depending on what you're assigned on a given day, you'll start from that day's or from the appropriate shortcut. In this case, I'm going to look at sports from the last day. This particular shortcut has photos and stories all mixed in, and I can search through them using the field over here. I can filter them down using the look for function, or, as may often be the case if you are a wire editor, you can literally just click on them, read the top of them in the preview down at the bottom of the screen, and just scroll through them with the arrow key to kind of see what's available and what's of interest. You'll notice there is a checkmark field, which tells you if any of them have already been picked up and therefore you want to avoid using them. If I scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see some examples of stories that have already been picked up by folks on our desk. And I could click on them to see where they've been used. So this one was used in the News and Notes folder for 0123 created by Steve Nishimura. All right, so when you found a story that you want to use as the basis for a story in our wire report, I'm going to go through the steps for how to do that. First, however, I'm going to expand my search just so I don't get in the way of things in live production. You wouldn't normally have to do that. So I'm going to find a story that I think is a good candidate. I can see the preview down here, can give it a little read. When I'm convinced it's good for what I need, I will right click on it and save. When I do, it brings up a dialog box that lets me choose where to save it. This is not unlike other save dialog boxes you've seen on your computer. It's just showing you the folders that exist within the Newsgate system. And so you can go to All Desks. Click on the All Desks button in this rail down the left side, and it will show you kind of the big category desks. So if you're working on national or international or business, for instance, even though there's a separate business desk, we tend to put lump all three of them together in the national international folder. If you're working in sports, you're going to go to the sports folder. So I'm going to double click in order to actually not just select, but to go to that sports folder. You see sports reflected up here. So now I'm seeing the contents of the sports folder. And there are a ton of contents in the sports folder. At the top are always the subdesks or subfolders. You can tell them because the icon looks like a little box with file folders in it. And as you scroll down, you'll get to a point where the icon transitions to just a regular story folder icon. So any story folder that has already been saved in the sports desk will be listed down below. So you can pretty much ignore everything after you get past these little subdesk icons. But when it comes to selecting where to save it, I would like you to navigate to one of the subdesks. Now, it may seem a little overwhelming at first. Don't let it overwhelm you. Where subdesk selection comes into play is later in the process when we're creating print packages. So for things that we want to propose or limit the print packages that you would create, choosing a specific subdesk will help you not have to filter through a massive list of packages. For instance, if I were to create this in the California subdesk, the region California subdesk, then when I go to create packages, the ones that would be suggested to me would only be the California papers. But before we go into too much detail on all that, which I don't plan to on this video at all, I will just tell you, if you're intimidated by this, then just choose the very first one, Common. You want to double click till you see Common listed up here. The magic about Common is when you go to create story packages later in this process, you will have the full selection of all the products that you can choose from. So instead of being filtered to show you just a subset of products, you'll see everything if you're in the Common desk. Down here's where you put a name using whatever naming convention is appropriate for the desk you're working on. And so I'm going to kind of shortcut this because this isn't for real production anyway. Having a hard time typing. So when you do that, two things happen. It creates a story folder that includes that text in it, and I can actually see that listed among my recent story folders in the task pane, or rather in the navigation pane to the left of my Wires workspace. But the other significant thing to note is it leaves you in the Wires workspace, so you can continue working and set up your next story folder, or maybe add photos to this one. So if this photo underneath needed to go in that story folder, I can drag it straight from this window to that folder that was just created in my recent story folder list. When I let up, it copies it into that story folder. So in that way, I can populate texts and photos, but again, it leaves me in my Wires workspace, so I can go ahead and set up my next story as well. So right-click, save. It remembers where I saved the last one, so I don't have to navigate that whole tree again. As long as I mean to be saving it in the same place. I'll give it also a naming convention. And it is also added to my recent story folders. Recent story folders will show you the last 10 story folders that you took action in. And so it's a very quick way to find stuff that you've recently been working in. So you could spend some time here in the Wires workspace and really populate quite a few story folders. At some point you're going to be ready to start editing those story folders. You can get to the most recent 10 here, but if you want to see the full list of everything you've been working on that day, it's better to go to the Story Folders workspace. In here, there are also a bunch of different shortcuts you could download. I would, in particular, direct you to the ones that start with Wire SF, or Wire Story Folders. There's one for Nat World Biz, and there's one for Sports. They will show you everything that's been created with today as a planning date in it. And since when you create new story folders, they default to having today as a planning date, what this functionally means is you see a list of every story folder that was created today in the Nat World Biz desk or in the Sports desk. So here you see the two I just created, Pistons and US Open, or Oper, looks like I misspelled it. You also see some story folders that Kenny Lewis was creating today. So you will see not only your story folders, but story folders that other Wire editors are working on. It's a really good way to look at just the stuff that we're working for today. If I want to go to one of those story folders, I could double click, or I could right click and open, go to, etc. They'll all take me to the same place. So here's what I want you to notice about this story folder. A couple of things. Actually, I'm going to go to the other one, this one. The first is the photos that I dragged in. Because I dragged them from the Wire list straight over to that recent story folders tab in my navigation pane at the left, they ended up being collected in the background portion of this story folder. That's because CCI wasn't sure whether I intended them for publication or just for reference, and so to be safe, it stashed them in what it calls background. If I were to try to create packages right now, I would not see them because they are hidden away in this area. So the first thing I have to do is drag them up to content. And because I've done that, they disappear from background, they show up here, and now I will be able to work with them in News Director just like any other photo. Now when I go to edit, the other thing I want you to notice before I go to edit the story is that there's also a print package already created in this story folder. That was created automatically. I didn't have to do anything special. That is part of our Wire workflow, so it is built into the process when you save to the Nat World Biz or the Sports desks. Now, if I go to edit this text, which is the one from the Wires, then it's going to open in News Director, and you'll have all the same editing tools that you're used to. So I could do tagging, etc. using common tags, all tags, etc. All right. Before I get too far into it, I want to point out one very major difference over what some of you may be used to. Many of our newsrooms use a media neutral workflow, meaning that the text that you would start working from would be listed outside of any individual packages down below. We call that the media neutral text. And that is, you don't see one of those in our wire story folders. Instead, the only text you see is indented as part of this 01_V package. Now, just because it's simpler to say, you might hear me call it a V1 package. It's significant that it is named 01_V, and that is just an alphabetical thing. A 01 package will always alphabetically come before any other package, so therefore it will always be listed at the top of your list. So if you hear me call it V1, this is what I mean, the package that is in the 01_V designation. So the wire text is already embedded in that package. That's where we'll do all our editing. It is not media neutral, but it will function like you are used to. It will become the parent for all of our other packages that we create. And in fact, as I drag these media neutral photos into this package, they also will disappear permanently from the media neutral area of the story folder, and they are now associated with this V1 package. That's all good, as you will see, because this will become the parent for all of our other packages. So I'll do the editing in the usual way. And when I'm ready to create packages, I'm going to use CCI's default packaging functionality, so that instead of having to create each from scratch, I can choose from pick lists. So significant in that are that, number one, before you create any packages, select the line that has 01V on it, that V1 line, so that it is highlighted gray. And then come over to the task pane and change to the default packaging task pane. If you're not accustomed to changing, just hover over the title at the top of the task pane, and when you click, it will show you a menu of items, and default packaging will be one of the menu. This is what I was referring to earlier. Because when we save this story folder, we saved it in the common area, there are checkboxes for every single product where we might want to save it. And so I can select from among these checkboxes. In this case, I'll select all my B packages and click Apply at the bottom. And using what I have highlighted over here as the source, it will create a package for each of the newsrooms that I had highlighted. And the packages created have the same contents as the package that I used as the source. I'll go ahead and save that. Not to put too fine a point on it, I want to point out that if instead of having the entire package selected, I had had only one element in the package selected at the point that I went to create a package, then the resulting package would have only that one element. So it didn't pick up the photos because I had only the text selected, as opposed to all of these previous packages that had the text and the photos, because when I created them, I had the whole package selected. So in this case, I've made a mistake. The easiest way to fix it is just to save, close, and go delete the errant package from News Access. I can't do that from, well, I might be able to do it from within News Director, frankly. I usually go out to do it. Go back in, and now I can do it the right way. Select the whole package, find what I want to add, and apply. It creates the new one that now has all the elements. The final thing I'll tell you is if you wanted to see some subsets, you could click on this ... here, choose any of the other subdesks, and you would see the list that includes just the things for that subdesk. So here are the California papers.